Good morning, Hanne, and thank you for joining us. I am Stephane Guerraz, as the management consultant working on training programs in higher education and culture in companies. And Berit is joining me.
And I'm Berit Sander. I'm a business psychologist working inside and outside the Danish society with human processes and relational processes in work life, business life.
So, Hanne, we are delighted to have you on today because I know you are a very strong proponent of culture, which is a topic dear to our heart, and a very accomplished business leader. Can you give us a couple of highlights of your career and also what you are doing these days?
You know, what is important is that I spent about 20 years of my life, actually a bit more, being a business owner. I was running a company called Business Minds together with two other partners in the end. And we were actually in 4 different countries, actually quite global. Like we were in Australia and in the Philippines and in Denmark and also in Dubai for a while. And yeah, after that, I had a very short period with a company called Quartz, where I was a partner, and then in Bain and Company, but I left there. And then since that, and that's for about 4 or 5 years, I've got a new career now, and that's like a portfolio career. That's apparently somebody people are talking about, but yeah, I guess I'm just involved with quite a few different companies in different ways. So both in boards and as an investor in various companies, and I've also worked and I still work with the universities as well, so in different ways, and have a couple of projects. I guess I should also say I have a computer science background and also a business background. For a while, I also worked with Stephane at the MBA program. I was a supervisor there with the MBA students.
It must be extremely inspiring. What are the most motivating thing in your work life?
I think in many ways I've sort of just continued what I did before, as you know, because I was involved with a lot of different companies as a management or data consultant, and that's what I still do. I'm sort of involved with a lot of different companies, and now it's very strategic, and it's nice when you're on the board, because then you get to follow the companies. I don't have to do the sort of the slides and all the detailed work, but I can really help them along the way, and I feel I can make a difference with asking good questions and being curious. It's not only in the board meetings, but it's also a part, you know, just follow a number of different companies. So I like that part. It's because I'm very curious as a person, and also willing to learn new things, and I get to do that by actually being on the top of that. And you have to be a busy person and be involved in a lot of different things. It actually helps you also do better when you are in the, you know, working on the board level or with investments or in consulting engagements like that. Yeah, so I find that very inspiring to be involved with a lot of different companies. And of course, also, you know, it's also a matter of then what you get involved with. And I guess in the beginning, I was a bit more just wanted to start my board career. So I just had to make that happen. And I know it's not that easy for a lot of people to get into board work. So you have to sort of find your way in there. And then after, you know, I've done that for some years now. It's not for a long time. It's been, I guess, 3 or 4 years now. I can be a bit more selective in what I get involved with, and I have my interest areas that I go for.
Being business psychologist, I became curious when you said overview and curiosity, and it came to my mind, I guess you also have to have a lot of courage. Do you see yourself as a courageous person?
Yeah, I can see that now, because I guess I have taken a lot of chances on the way, because for instance, just moving to Australia with 3 children the second time around, not knowing, you know, what the income level would be or whatever. You know, what I've done and I've been working very independently. I think that's been a drive also for me, and not that I've ever decided to be sort of a entrepreneur, but you know, that's, I guess, what I have been. It's just, so it takes a lot of courage, but it also takes a lot of just understanding your financial situation. And being a bit smart on that, because if you have money in the bank, you can also decide to do what you like to do. And
yeah.
if you, for instance, are working on something you don't quite like, and I know a lot of people who are saying, oh no, I just have to stick with it, and I will apply for a new job. And some people actually end up being stressed while they actually work in these bad conditions and applying jobs for other jobs at the same time. And I'm trying to say to people, just leave and find your next adventure. And for many people, it's not possible because they actually spend whatever they or are afraid that, you know, for income to the situation that they can't do it. And I think I sort of a little bit more better. It's not that I've made a lot of more money, I think, than a lot of other people, but I've just been a bit more careful about, you know, my spending, and it's never been a big thing for me to spend a lot of money.
So you are
I have never been driven by the money. It's more from other things. So,
but then what you explain is that you are a very relevant mix between courage and carefulness. The right mix.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm not just because I think, you know, what you see a lot of, like, I think it's quite often given to the male, saying that a little bit more risk taking. I think I'm not really a big risk taking person. I'm just doing a bit cautious also about, you know, understanding what the same when I'm investing in startups. I will not, and I've been also, I guess, lucky, but it's also my natural thing. I would not go into something that's very early in a startup. I say I have to work with the company for a while before I can see what it is, and then I can invest. And it's the same even in our own company, Business Minds. We never took actually any foreign other investments in it. Also a different case, you didn't be quite needed. But I think sometimes it's a lot of risk taking when you actually just spend other people's money, take loans or whatever you do. Yeah.
So what are your criteria involved in projects today, Hanne?
Oh yes, Stephane, I have to say also, sometimes I say yes to a little bit too many things, but that's something I have to exercise the whole life, you know, trying to be careful not to say yes to too many things. But, you know, I guess I'm interested quite often when it's a bit something I can see that's also a complex situation for me. If there's some tech involved, it's nice, but it doesn't have to be. Just that there's some complexity. And also, I have to say that I like the people I have to work with, because that's very important for me. I had a few situations where I worked with people that I didn't quite, we never really clicked, and I just don't want to go there again. So I want to work with people that I can see that I learn from, or that I like in different ways, and that's very important. Then I have to say I work with sustainability, but it's not just from a good heart. You know, I'm a very, what you call, conscious person. I want to have retfærdighed in Danish. What is that called?
Fairness.
I forget the words. Fairness. I have also some family members that are politicians, and I really like fairness. So there are different courses that I think, you know, for instance, I love that we use, we can reduce CO2 in the world, like carbon emissions. And so I'm involved with a couple of startups in that kind of area. So I like that kind of, if we do something good in impact investment, it's also called, or impact startups. I like that part, but it's not the only thing. Then I also like education, higher education. And so, because I have a background, we have worked in 10 different industries. I can't say that it's just only that industry. I work with quite a few different things. Like, for instance, I'm also now sitting on the board of ITU at the IT University. And that's also, I'm coming from again, computer science background. So I think I can make a difference there. And also I understand quite a bit. I think education is really important. So there's quite a few different topics, but I say actually, of course, I have to be able to add something to the company. If I can't make a difference, I shouldn't be there. You know, of course, that's the main criteria.
That is your portfolio career. Stephane, the culture issue, we are very curious about that.
Yes, I know you are a strong proponent of the importance of culture, especially for boards. And I was wondering whether you could explain why this is important.
Yeah, and it's sort of, sometimes I don't call it culture. I just talk that we need to have a good working condition in the room. And it's also like, again, being with people that you can click with, and we have to respect each other. We have to listen to each other. I'm also very, I like to talk quite a bit, sometimes too much, but it's also a good, the best thing is if you can just listen and ask good questions and really having a respectful situation. And then I also believe in diversity. And I guess it's also because it is maybe also because I'm a woman, and I can just see we're still underrepresented in many cases. And it's not only about women, it's also about having different type of people there. So I think, culture, you can't sort of explain exactly what culture is. And quite often it's sort of the hidden thing in the room. But if you don't have a good culture in the boardroom or in top management, how can you have a good culture in the rest of the organizations? So it comes both from, it has to be there in all levels.
The way I understood you talking about culture was starting with the boardroom. What is the culture within the boardroom? But as you said, that also sets the tone for what's happening elsewhere in the organization. So
yes, and yeah, I just want to say, because in a lot of situations, at least in Denmark, we are sort of quite even, and I don't see like it has to always come from the top, because there can be very good people. I have as I said, computer science background, and a lot of let's just say in an IT environment, everybody are equal, and a lot of people don't need a lot of management. So we are actually more there to facilitate that we are actually going in the right direction. And a lot of people are very good, and they don't take a lot of top management and management in general. We don't need all the different layers. But again, that also depends on what type of organization you're working in.
Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Have you seen that difference between in Denmark, where we have a very low power distance, and in the other countries? Have you
Yes, I've seen it in Denmark, but I've also seen just within Denmark how different it is. If you're working in the big companies in Denmark, there's a lot of hierarchy there. And quite often, there's a lot of middle and layers of management, and every layer, that would be maybe like, let's say one has 4 or 5 report managers below. And it's quite often, I think, it's quite an inefficient way to manage or run an organization. Because especially if it's specialists you're working with, that's not the right way. Well, it's also because I'm coming from, let's say, a little bit of an organization background. Here we're talking about experts, and they need different types of management, and you just need to quite often try to organize in a different way. And that's also about culture. Because it's because, I guess, respect for individual. I've seen, for instance, in Australia, you'd say there's maybe a little bit more power distance there. That is, if you're looking at the culture, the research, I forget the name of the guy who's done all that. There's a lot of different culture, power distance and all that in different countries. But I think just within Denmark, we have also, it's quite different.
Are you thinking about Hochgräfe? Is that the guy you?
Yes, I guess. Yeah. Sorry, I just can't remember on the top of my head.
No, sure.
Yeah, but I think it is very important, but also how you organize yourself. And you can do a lot, because quite often there's actually a lot of, I would say, for instance, in banks, insurance companies in Denmark, and there's a lot of extra fat in the organization. It's not run in a very efficient way necessarily, and it's also because they are not really pressured. So there can be a lot of it, and there's also wasted work. And we're talking about this pseudo work as well. Mm-hmm. And of course, if you're a big organization, there's also a lot of coordination that has to happen. So that it is difficult.
How do you work with entrepreneurs who are starting their company or scaling it up to help them navigate and avoid the pitfall you were just mentioning about the bureaucratic inefficiency and the bad work condition that can happen?
Yeah, I guess, it's a big question. I think a lot of the things that I work, it's not maybe so much culture here we're talking about, but it's quite awful, because I've been in the same situation as some of them, at least, knowing what, you really have to be careful and work on the right kind of areas at the right time. If you have, so it's quite often, a matter of, if it's quite early companies, they would need to have enough funding. So the funding is really important to understand what the funding situation. So there are some very specific problems that you have in the beginning, in the early days of a company. So it could be funding, it could be also bandwidth, getting the right employees in. And so that's the kind of thing we would then focus on a lot. What is important for them now? So there's not a lot of talk about efficiency or culture or other big things. And, you know, also some of the dangerous things in the beginning of a company is like, let's say there's a number of founders, and if like some conflicts between the founders, or a founder leave, or other founders don't like one of the founders. So these are the really dangerous things that we have to be careful about, you know. And there you can talk about, that's also culture, because do they have the same work ethics? Do they have the same values, these founders? They don't need to have exactly the same thing. And it's not that you can always say these things loud, but it's very important about the people, you know.
But are you?
And that's also culture. Yeah.
It's also culture. Are you actually explaining to us that in a startup, in an earlier period, the tendency is not to focus that much on relationships, on culture, on psychological safety, but more on the financial situation, the growth situation? Is that a point you are?
Well, I'm not saying it's always like that, but I guess quite often, let's say, a lot of people in startups would be focused on making results. You know, they're quite performance oriented. They want to achieve things. But I think also there are some people out there that are also doing it because they actually want to be in a good working situation where there is a good culture. So they are cautious about that. And they are quite often good people that are trying to really do something good with their heart, and also are naturally good at managing other people, because they have that kind of the right kind of ethics around what they do. But you can have both situations. And I guess I would more be involved with the one that are a little bit more cautious about it. If I have to be, I am the one to have to teach them and try and change them. I don't want to be there, you know. So it's much easier to work with somebody who is actually looking for some the kind of help I can give them. And I think a lot of it will be psychological safety, because also you have to give them hope. You have to make sure they're working in the right direction, and that's both in very small companies, but also bigger companies, where you're there to actually make that kind of, you're sort of the safe person to go to. You can help them talk about things that are hard, because if you are in a boardroom, I've also experienced that in a boardroom, and if the founders, or let's say just the CEOs, or like the C-level, are always trying to just look good in the boardroom, they're not showing what the problems are. It's going to go wrong. It's not an efficient way to work. You have to be in a safe space there in the boardroom. Or also, if it's a small company or a little bit bigger, or even a big company, I would say it's the same thing that goes with that.
Everybody talks about that psychological safety, and Berit and I do talk about it, you know, as often as we can almost. But I was wondering how you did in practice. And so here you gave a couple of clear hints of showing yourself as a person, including where you don't know, and finding the right settings to have those maybe more difficult conversation, or more personal, more intimate conversations. Is there anything else you can think of that, you know, that you use as practices to instill that psychological safety?
And we were talking about the one-to-one meetings. Of course, it's quite, you can do a lot with that. But sometimes you also need help from outside. So I've been in a situation recently. It wasn't me who was sort of organizing all this. It was actually done within the company, because certainly if there's some crisis going on in a company, it can be anything. People start getting scared, and it actually it's like a flu, you know, that moves from one person to the next very quickly. And that's the kind of thing you have to stop. That's psychological safety, or anxiety, or even people getting really scared. And you need to get that stopped. And it's, for instance, the first thing is to say to staff, if there are something bad happening, let's say they have to fire somebody, or so if you start getting a little bit unsecure, go and talk to your first manager, and all these kind of things. But it might not be enough. And then, of course, you can use somebody from outside to help you in that. It could be a psychologist helping you get that, you know, understand what's going on. If there are some problems, you can't always see it on the surface. Again, what is going on? What are people unsure about? And you might need to have some help from outside to make that.
Exactly, to
okay.
support the dialogue, the relevant dialogue. Yeah. In a good timing as well. That's what you mentioned.
Yes. Yeah, because if there are issues like that, it sort of disturbs a lot, of course, and it's not an efficient way to work. People need to feel good when they go to work, and they have to sleep well at night. And it could be stress, it can be anything like that. And of course, we always try to put a little bit of pressure on and get things done. But you don't want people to be sleepless at night or just to be unsure at work. It doesn't. Then they don't think properly. That's your reptile brain going into action, and it's like you get scared, or you want to flight, or you just freeze. You have these simple mechanisms going on, and you don't think rationally.
And it connects nicely to what you earlier said about how important it is to be aware of the culture in the system, in the company, that it is legitimate and it's okay to talk about issues when it's relevant, not being kind of diving into the private stuff, but diving into the personal stuff when it's relevant. Having a culture where that is supported and accepted, that's the basis of psychological safety, of course. Yeah, sure.
Last question we had was around the diversity you started to talk about. And I was wondering, what do you see, as you said, diversity is more than, let's say, having a woman on the board or things like that. So what do you see as the main needs for companies to understand diversity in Denmark?
I first have to say that I thought we were actually better off in Denmark than we are. Being a sort of, we have that feeling that we are quite equal, but apparently we're not. So we still have some quite tough issues. And of course, there are quite often women that are actually selecting not to be on boards or in the top level, but quite often for good reasons, because it's like the working conditions that are wrong. There's not made enough flexibility for being able to work in different ways, because quite often it's not really about doing the 50 hours weeks. Of course, sometimes that's required, but you have to be flexible around the arrangement to make that happen. So I think that's really important to stress that it's quite often it's because we have some beliefs about how work should be, and it's in a very male traditional way, the way it's done. And quite often you can see, you get also that psychological safety, let's say for women, as one example, if there are 40% women in the organization, and it's not only on the floor, it has to be on all levels, and it doesn't happen like that. I've seen quite a few companies where there's nobody on the top, in the sort of the top layers, no women.
No. The statistics are not that inspiring.
No. And of course, it's actually helping a little bit now on the board levels. Are actually more women getting into boards now. It's getting a little bit better, but we still have some quite bad numbers older than Denmark, I'm quite sure. But if you look at the top, the C level, or also in even startups or in investments, we have very few women. And also, like for instance, female founders that are asking for money. There are some statistics that are really, really bad. It's like they get maybe I'm not saying it totally right, but let's say they get 2.5% of the total investments. That's going to female founders. And apparently there should be about, it's 30% women starting companies, but only 2.5% are giving to the pure. Then there are mixed teams. I think that when we have mixed teams where they're both female and male on in the founders team, I think we go up to 10%, but the rest of it goes to men.
That's weird.
No, some really bad. No, it's not weird. It's just because all the males also who are investing. That's it's males also investing, and also there are some female, but then they also invest in males. Yeah, so that's a level where we have some really, really bad numbers. Yes.
So there are some habits
in Denmark.
In Denmark, and there are some strong habits that needs to be broken down.
Yeah, and it doesn't happen from one day. And again, cultural change or any change, it will take a long time unless you do something with regulation. It doesn't change quickly. It will take many, many years before that changes.
And it doesn't happen by itself.
No.